while it seems silly that you're documenting one-page code, it is massively important, even though I don't always do the greatest job. Here in the examples, they'll have the different sections from where we're at in here. So when they go through the main window, definitions. Really? Okay, I'm like, who's playing Warcraft?
No, I don't think it's Warcraft. I think it's like actual like music class or something.
It goes through this, but this is using the GUI. I'll build it and run it real quick too, so I can show you guys that these are actually working things, and they go through exactly how it's constructed. So you would be able to reproduce, and then I just realized there's no audio.
True.
Forgive me if this is loud.
So yes, it magically works, and they go through the whole process of making a very simple media player that you can run through this example in about 2 hours to figure out how they did it. So, and then generating this, there's 2 ways of generating the GUI environment. Either you hard code and sort of say, hey, this is how all the proportions work, or I'll show you the design view when I pull up my project in a second, that I use because I don't want to have to mess with how to manually code all that when doing a fast project. So what I've used most of my projects for Qt and GUI is designing a front end so that I can just do button clicks, slider changes of values. Because a lot of the times you might need to do something where you produce a result and that result needs to be consumed by another piece of the application. And sometimes making it go, especially when you're working with vision, it's real helpful to see it as you're working on it. And rather than, okay, the thing ran, now I need to open each file in its own little viewer, like I have GNOME and whatever Windows and Mac use, because I don't know their names of their programs. So one of the things you can do is just set these up, move them around, like I'm going to move that down there, and when you recompile it and run it, it'll start working like it moved down there. So the way I use this is, this specific project, what I was doing is trying to find license plates in cars, which is way advanced, and I'm not going to go through how I even sort of failed at doing that. But the important thing is you start with an original image, and then each of these segments here are different filters that my image would get passed through. And if I wrote this strictly in command line like we normally do, I would have to code it in there, either do a configuration file or I read it every time, that way I knew what values to set at, and then sort of fish it through, generating a small image every time, and then exporting that image, and then the next filter, reading it in, and generating it. That way I can see the in-between process too, as to where it could screw up. Whereas in this case, I can set my parameters here, and then just recall them by, in my case, I just say go. But I can open an individual or process what I have in my database. So if I do this, this is my result, and it's obviously wrong. But it has all the different intermediate steps. And how I was going to do this before I got it working in Qt was I was hard coding values in. So I'd have to, if I didn't like those values, I'd have to go back into my original source code file, change the value, compile, and rerun. And I know that's not a good programming technique, but I hate dealing with command line input sometimes. So I opted to go for, I want to move up my threshold. So rather than recompiling, I just said something where I looked at the threshold slider and I told it to rerun. And as you can see, it changed a little bit.
What if you wanted it to redo it as you move the slider?
You can do that. You can. The way I have it here is set so that you can set the value and then you tell it to go. One of the ways of interacting with this object says, upon update, call the thing that makes it run. I was worried about memory collision due to how I was managing memory on the back end, so I didn't want to have it go ding, 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 call it a bunch of times in a row.
Thread safety is an issue, I think.
It's single-threaded. But I wasn't, again, sure how it handled its forefront and then how it was calling my back.
Qt's not thread safe now?
Yes, it is if you use its version of threads. But since I was using my back end with their front end,
Okay.
I wasn't 100% sure on exactly how that worked. Threads are, for the younger members, generally whenever you write your code, you have one thread that runs through your entire program. This program could have, let's pretend 4 threads. One is just for my code, and the 3 other ones handle the spinner, the go button, or something like that. So a lot of the times, like with Firefox, it's multi-threaded. That's how you can have a web page loading and you can do stuff in other tabs or whatnot. So they're constantly swapping out who's doing work where. It's not a very sequential base. And that is a very bad definition, but it's a very quick definition. So yes, that's how I use this program, and that's how I've encouraged a lot of people I've talked to, because once you get this going, it's very easy to make quick changes. And specifically, so I'll show you guys the canny and how this changes and does its updates real quick. That way, to give you guys kind of an idea.
I think one thing you should mention is that it's Qt wants to take over your whole everything. It wants to be in charge of everything. It's like when you have your own back end, you can't, if your back end wanted to be the main process, you couldn't do that easily in Qt.
You'd have to write a function that would, you'd have to write your own state control to tell it to fire off Qt events.
Yeah.
So no, you cannot use it as a GUI system in a video game. It's a forefront of a program, yes, but you don't have to use their development environment, their framework, if you do not want. So, for example, if you don't think they handle memory correctly, or you think that their list implementation is slow, you can use your own. Go right ahead. And you can have your program be the timer in the background and be the main control, and then you just have to make sure that the way that Qt wants to be informed that something's happening is included in your code somewhere. So, yes and no.
Well, what I've seen is anybody who's tried to do that has tended to get very
When was the
frustrated.
last time you looked?
Oh,
Yeah, 'cause it's changed a lot since we used it for RoboCup.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, the past couple iterations have been pretty significant changes.
Yeah.
And that was what I was saying, is they work now based on that's not it.
I've even seen in some of the blogs online in like Slashdot posts that people complain that if you try to do things your own way and interface with Qt, you fail. And it's easier just to do everything the way Qt likes you to do. Use Qt lists, use Qt everything.
Well, yeah, it does make things convenient, because I'll show you an example as to why it's not convenient sometimes.
Yeah, like their threads. You didn't use their threads, it's not thread safe.
Well, like I said, I don't know. I have not actually looked into it, so I cannot make a definitive answer. And I'll be honest, 90% of the time, I don't trust Slashdot. I mean, those people are on there to bitch, just to bitch. So, but it works with what are called slots in
Signals?
slots and signals. Yes. I'm trying to find them. I haven't looked at this code in a while.
That's been around for 7 or 8 years in Qt slot.
Yeah, that's how they interact. And I apologize.
There's no search.
There we go. Okay, yeah. It's a new class type in classes for them private slots. These are the functions that get called, and then they are linked up by connecting your GUI elements to signals, like when clicked. This was when Dr. Chelberg was talking. These two were my sliders, and on it changes the value it calls this function and grabs the value out of wherever it is currently on update. And then you can have it fire, like the one that made it re-render the picture was this one right here, and it was when it was clicked. So whenever this one was, whenever the sliders were changed, just an integer value was changed on my backend data structure. And then you can have it instead call this go command that will grab, in my case I specifically made it grab the integer file I stored, but you could have it grab whatever's currently in those slider values. So as you're dragging it, it will keep firing it, firing it, firing it, firing it. So I do believe there is a disconnect between when, I think those things are threaded and then it fires, part of it's your thread. I cannot, again, verify that because I'm not that deep into it. Question?
Does Q auto-generate these event handlers like Visual Studio?
Yeah.
Or did you actually hard-code it by yourself?
They're already in there.
Okay. Because I know in Visual Studio, like, you create a button, you can click, it creates a function to handle that event. Is that kind of the same?
No, you have to create the function to handle the event.
Oh, okay.
But you can,
Yes.
as long as it's a void function, it'll work.
Okay.
Or you can, yeah, you can't have it return anything. It has to be a void function. But you can use a lot of it where you use it to call a host of functions that then can have things. So it's sort of an entry module to a degree. It's in Visual Studio, if you use that with the Windows API, I believe, they have a lot of similarities. Both these toolkits will probably work very similarly, just Windows is not portable. It is not as portable as Qt. That was one of the things that I wanted to bring up, is that it's mostly, I like it because of the portability potential. I don't use it for that. But I also mainly run Linux, and doing anything with Windows and whatnot, like windowing systems and Linux is bloody irritating.
He's on his way to go
Okay.
at a faster speed than you were.
I don't have a whole lot more.
Okay.
I do want to answer questions left.
So how easy it is to use Python with this?
There are Python bindings.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I have no idea because I don't like Python.
Oh,
You three piss off. I'm sorry, my dealings with Python have not been good. Mostly because I have to deal with the conversions between 2 and 3. What, Rico?
Can you use MATLAB with this?
Can MATLAB generate C code?
Yes.
And yes, you can. Most of my programs are actually written in
So
C.
you could actually use this to create, because I know you can create GUIs with MATLAB itself. They have a GUI framework. So realistically, you could actually use this instead to create MATLAB GUIs.
Then you have to export all your MATLAB codes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the MATLAB libraries, which is a whole other issue.
Yeah.
MATLAB,
Oh, yeah.
you don't compile, it doesn't really, it gives you a 500 megabyte DLL, so all of its internal commands are not spit out to you in C anymore. So it basically just calls its DLL based on your code. It won't.
Oh yeah, you could use
It
it.
used to spit out all
I'm
the
not sure how
strings.
cross-platform it is. You know, it does that a little bit differently on Macs and PCs and Linux.
Yeah, it would be tough.
It would be tough to make it all.
You'd have to
Yeah.
compile wherever you were at.
So yes, it would be interesting.
Theoretically, you
difficult.
could probably, well,
Get away
if
with
you
it.
want to, I think it's better just to stick in MATLAB GUI.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's obviously interesting enough and useful enough that Autodesk decided to switch over their whole system
Is there a version for like iPod and iPad?
of
I
Q.
don't think so. Yeah, Q.
No.
I don't think so.
You think Apple would let it on their system? No.
Yeah. Develop code for it now. I mean, the deal is, you know, you can use it in a lot of different development environments that develop code that just calls Apple stuff. You can have a backend that was all Apple calls.
You can have it